Good morning, everyone. How are we doing this morning? All right. Pleasure to join you all here with Todd Stottlemyre. Todd was a 14-year Major League Baseball player for the Toronto Blue Jays, where he won 2 World Series, the Oakland Athletics, St. Louis Cardinals, Texas Rangers, and the Arizona Diamondbacks, where he also won a World Series against the local boys back in 2001. Todd's done a lot of really interesting things post-baseball career, which is why we're here to talk about all the different things that he's done. So really fun to be here and looking forward to the conversation with you. So very quick background. So Todd was the third pick in the overall in the 1985 Rule 4 entry draft in baseball by the Toronto Blue Jays. Born into the game from a baseball family. Father Mel pitched 11 years for the Yankees, was a 5-time All-Star before embarking on a long and storied coaching career. Your brother, Mel Jr., pitched briefly in Major League Baseball, was most recently the Seattle Mariners pitching coach. So safe to say that you grew up in it and baseball's in your blood. Career-wise, 138 wins, durable pitcher who averaged 210 innings pitched per year, which doesn't happen a whole lot in today's day and age. That you'd be in the way up in this year in the overall innings pitched. The
longer you're out, the better you are.
Yeah. That's right. So durable, 3-time World Series winner. Started World Series Game 4 in 1993, which I had the pleasure / misfortune as a Philadelphia Phillies fan of being at. One of the most interesting games of all time. Pitched in the 92 World Series. And probably the most little-known fact about you is that Todd boasts a 1,000 on-base percentage in the World Series, having gone 0 for 0 with a walk in that 93 game. You didn't even know that, right?
That's crazy.
So that's the playing career summary. But since you've retired, you've held a variety of different executive positions. So we're going to take quickly through what you've done. So you retire, and instead of hanging out at home for years and getting fat and enjoying the fruits of a very long career, what do you do?
Well, the first thing was, I'd never been on a summer vacation my entire life. And growing up, the son of a Yankee great, and our summers were, well, I guess our summers growing up was a vacation. And Yankee Stadium being the playground, and then to follow in Dad's footsteps to play Major League Baseball. I'd never taken my family anywhere in the summer because that's when we worked. And I thought, well, it sounds smart to take a year off. And I was fortunate to where I was being offered a lot of jobs in baseball. But, taking a job in baseball as a coach is more time away from your family because they actually spend more time at the park and at the field. The hours are greater. And I thought, I really wanted to be a dad. I wanted to put my kids to bed at night. I wanted to take them to school. I wanted to be at the dinner table. So my thought was I'm going to go into a different area. I just didn't know what that looked like. And after being off for 6 months, I started to go to bed and I was anxious, had some anxiety, like who am I? In my whole life, I was either the son of a Major League Baseball player or I was a Major League Baseball player. I was one of the two. And all of a sudden, I'm neither. I'm a former this and I'm a former that. And during that period of time, I was like, I got to find something to do. And actually, I think my wife found me a job because she got tired of me being at home. And I went to work for a Wall Street firm. I worked for Merrill Lynch, built an asset management team, and 6 months into retirement. It was funny because people were like, what do you know about that? And I said, I don't know anything yet. And yet was but what I was smart enough to do was I'd grown up watching my dad play for a team. I played for a team. I was like, I'm going to go build a team. And I built a team inside the firm of the best people I could get my hands on. And we began raising capital. And we built an incredibly successful asset management team. And then in my 5th year, I woke up deciding going to an office doesn't sound like very much fun. So I decided to start my own hedge fund, partner with a guy in New York. So I went from one office to another office. I never said I was smart, and I'm back going to an office. And about 6, 8 months into that career, what I realized was that I loved it, and it was like pitching every day and competing. But what I didn't love was the quality of life that I had with my family, and I was now getting up at 3:30, and I was getting home at 5:30, and I had 4 Bloomberg terminals in my home office, 15 at my office at work, and it was like there was something going on in the financial markets, and I didn't want to miss it, and it consumed me, and I was like, I got to get away from this, and then went on and built a sales force with a company, wrote a book, and we started some companies from the ground up, and now I'm on to the next phase of business, so it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and and it's funny because I think what you're saying resonates with a lot of people in the room, and a nice shout out and unpaid endorsement for Bloomberg terminals as you go through this. But so a lot of that is this should resonate with you all, and it likely does in many ways. The irony of this, by the way, is that neither Todd nor I is anything close to an expert in the subject of crowdfunding. So what we know about crowdfunding, we basically talked about in the green room before, which was that the first Major League Baseball team in 1869, first professional baseball team in 1869, the players were paid essentially through crowdfunding, through passing the hat at the different games that they used to play at the Cincinnati Red Stockings in 1869. That said, so you now embarked on a successful speaking, executive coaching career, father of 5, husband of 1, right? And so let's start by talking about transitions, and specifically yours. How'd you know it was time to hang them up? I mean, most athletes are told to retire.
Yes.
Right? You weren't.
It was easy for me because I knew I was finished. Injuries had I'd been plagued with injuries, and I had to go through some surgeries my last couple years. The medical professionals were like, if we do surgery, we don't think we could fix you where you could perform at that level. So I decided not to go the surgery route, just go as far and long as I could. And every game was like it was like Christmas, because it was like I got through that one, and then it's like 5 days later is Christmas Day again. Can I figure out a way to get back out on the mound? So it was just how far could I extend this thing? But ultimately, I realized that I wasn't competing at the level I needed to compete at, and it was more difficult to overcome the injuries and to come back and perform at that level. So when I left the game, I left with the mindset that I'd left everything on the field. And I was very grateful for that, because a lot of athletes today leave the game believing they can still do it, just nobody wants them to do it. And that can be very, very frustrating, is when you think you can, but no one thinks you can. That's a difficult thing to overcome. And I think that leads to, can lead to depression and a lot of things that a lot of athletes have to go through, because they go from the star or perceived star of that field to where all of a sudden no one wants you and there's no job for you. But they still think they can do it. So it's very difficult. I'm very fortunate that I didn't have to go through that piece. I knew I was finished.
Yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about transition moments with professional athletes, and we've run a program at my former employer at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania for NFL players, getting them ready for life after the game ends, because there are so many athletes that struggle with it. But people struggle in general with it, right?
Sure.
And struggle. Think about your personal life in the room and the transition moments that you've had, whether it's go back to your freshman year of high school, or go back to your freshman year of college, or the first year that you were a parent, or the first year in a new job. Those are difficult years for a lot of people, right? The first time through everything. Why do you think people struggle so much with it in general, beyond just the professional athlete? So there you've got the lack of adulation, change in lifestyle. It's the only job you've ever really been prepared to do. You've done it extremely well at an extraordinarily high level. What about for others?
Well, I think you get caught up in, unfortunately, being comfortable, right? And you're comfortable in your space, or you're comfortable in your knowledge, wisdom, education, whatever it is. And there's that fear, that underlying fear to try something new. And with the fear of trying something new and going and doing something else, what happens is people first tell you you're crazy, right? Because how could you leave the comfortable job? How could you leave the comfortable space? How could you leave the comfortable income to go follow a dream or an aspiration? I would say, how could you not? How could you not go follow the dream or aspiration? how could you possibly even stay comfortable? As a country, we didn't get where we are today being comfortable, but yet now we've a claim to it, right? It's like I got this great job and I've got a pension and I work for a company and I'm going to do until when. And it's that word, until when, or until what happens. And then you find yourself in a place where, man, I wish I would have spent some time at least learning and educating myself on maybe something new opportunity, new vision, new dream. Look, I believe that if you've ever had the thought, then you were also given the responsibility to carry out the thought. Look, I'm 53. I reinvent myself every day, and it's kind of like, you know, people today, you know, it's like 50. You know, the old days of. It's funny as I think back to people working 72 hours, and that was a work week, and then what they realized was we moved it to 60 because the 12 was at the water cooler, and now it's 40. And there's 168 hours in a week. So if you work 40 hours a week, what in the hell do you do with the other 128 hours, right? And what a great opportunity if you're working 40, 50 hours a week, that if you have a vision, you have a dream, to go learn, to go educate, to go try, to go get in those environments. But most people, to kind of finish where I started, is fear keeps them from doing it. And it's the fear of who? It's the fear of the opinion of the group they're hanging out with, that why are you doing that? What are you thinking? And I would say you're thinking great. You've made yourself, you've gotten to a place where you put yourself in an uncomfortable setting where you had to start at ground zero. I mean, look, this entire room, every person in this room is for sure more educated than I am. But I also go into every day. It's like not caring what people think, and taking a look at opportunity everywhere, and then being willing to start at ground zero, not as the expert.
So that's interesting. I mean, so that willingness to fail, willingness to learn, willingness to be, in my case, certainly in many of my academic settings, the dumb guy in the room, right? You know, that takes a certain amount of fortitude, right?
Well, failure is your best friend, absolutely. I mean, I think I learned it from athletics, obviously. You know, you have to, in order to be a great winner, you have to be a great loser or failure. Look, most of the people here in New York know the name Derek Jeter, right?
I think they're vaguely familiar.
If not, then
All right.
That's okay too. But I mean, think about it. I mean, the all-time hits leader for the New York Yankees. And if you didn't live in the state of New York and you weren't a Yankee fan, and you said, well, who's the all-time hits leader for the New York Yankees? You might say Ruth, you might say Mantle, you might say Maris, you might say DiMaggio. You might go through all these names, but then you get to a guy by the name of Jeter. But how did he become the all-time hits leader? We had to fail over 7,000 times to acquire 3,000 hits. And when you think about it, are you willing to fail in whatever you do? Are you willing to put yourself out there to fail? Not only did he fail, but he failed over 7,000 times. He had to walk back to the Yankee dugout not being successful in order for him to become the best of all time. I believe that that's in life, is failure is absolutely your greatest teacher. If you're not failing, you're not getting better. If you're not getting better, then you've become complacent. If you become complacent, you're comfortable. If you're comfortable, the slide down the mountain is not a whole lot of fun.
So in my experience in working with professional athletes, I found that a lot of the professional athletes play the game for the love of the money that comes from playing the game more than they love playing the game itself. Was that your experience or any of your teammates?
Well, I'll say this, that if you're pursuing the bottom line or the money, if that's your pursuit, then usually the money will actually be at the bottom, right? You know, it's interesting. We had this conversation over the phone, and you know, growing up at Yankee Stadium, it was like I pursued my father's career. I just thought he had the best job in the world. He played a game of baseball. He called it work. People showed up. They either cheered for him that day or booed him, one of the two. And then in the winter, it was time with family. I really understood not only the environment inside of his career, but I understood the environment outside of his career and his lifestyle. And that's really important. See, I craved all of Major League Baseball. I wanted the 3 months off a year, but I was willing to dedicate my life and self to the 9 months and to the travel and to everything that's going to come with it. But, you know, I was very fortunate. Once again, I never pursued the money. I still can't believe they paid me the money they paid me. I remember my last contract. I called my father. I said, "You're not even going to believe this." And he said, "Son, when they pay you, just get the check to the bank as fast as you can." And it was, you know, and I mean, look, I mean,
and that's the Arizona Diamondbacks.
I mean, it's crazy that my last 30 days of Major League Baseball, I made more money in 30 days than my father did in 10 years with the New York Yankees. That's just, like, when you look at that, I know it makes a lot of people mad because my father was a lot better pitcher. You know, he was a legend with the Yankees, a 5-time All-Star. He's a 5-time world champion. And then his you know, his spoiled son comes along and follows in his footsteps and out-earns him in 30 days. You know, my son is 13. Maybe he'll out-earn me in 30 days too, and that'll be cool. But at the end of the day, it's not about the money. And I never pursued the money. I pursued the dream of playing and following his footsteps. And then once you get there, it's pursuing becoming the best you can be, because if you don't, pretty soon they find somebody else that wants to do that.
Well, and then it's funny because for the athletes who are pursuing it for money, right? Once you've gotten the dirty secret is that most players don't make very much money until they get to free agency, if they get to free agency, right?
Yep.
So once you get to free agency, and in baseball the money's guaranteed, right? As long as you show up, it's guaranteed. You could stink, right? So then what happens to your fire, right? And then what happens to your performance? Right, and by the way, for the employer, the team, right, there's a high amount of risk that goes with that.
Look, it's the same thing. It's the love of the game. You're either going to pursue to be the best you can be, or you pursued the money, you got the money, you grew comfortable. Next thing you know, you're being booed, you're being called lazy, and this and that. And ultimately, you don't typically stay on those clubs. They find a way to get rid of you and cash you off somewhere. It's the same thing if you go into a business, right? And the person I showed up at a bookstore. I was going to buy the books, and the clerk was on the phone, on their cell phone. I was like, man, I'm trying to buy books. I'm trying to give this company money, and they don't even want to take my money. They're so busy, caught up. And it's like, well, as an athlete, if you perform the way that clerk performed, they find themselves out of a job.
Right.
And yeah, they got the money, but it's not just money. To me, happiness is so much more. It's about the circle of life. To me, there's 8 forms of wealth, and money is just one of those forms of wealth.
So to follow up on that, you know, you mentioned earlier and then touched upon it just now, the quality of life versus financial issue, family time, lifestyle, fun. Can you expound on that a bit?
Well, I think when I co-founded the hedge fund, I thought, you know, it sounded really cool. I had the idea. I was like, I always wanted to do this. And now here's the opportunity, and so co-founded the fund, and once again I found myself not being able to get away from the fund. I found myself being addicted to the public markets worldwide through my Bloomberg terminal. Bloomberg's the problem with that career.
Right.
Anyways, I couldn't get away with it. Well, I couldn't get away from it. So what did that mean? Well, what it really meant was that I was losing time with my kids. I have 5 children. I was losing time with my spouse. I was losing time that was important, thinking about my health and fitness. I was losing time away from spirituality, personal development, relationships, family, all of these things. Yeah, I was pursuing the goal, pursuing the dream, and it was great, and it was gratifying, and I was grateful for it. But at the same time, if I looked at everything outside of the job and the career, those things were just kind of status quo. And I didn't want to be that person. I didn't want to live that life.